this morning, as I was preparing for a little small idea, I looked outside to my garden. I'm always very grateful for my garden because every day when a plant grows, when a plant dies, it reminds me of the cycle of life. The trust that the sun will rise in the morning, the sun will also set at the end of the day. So what keeps us going? What is the one thing that is going to ensure that we will thrive and survive in this lifetime? Many people spend a large part of their adult life, sometimes a whole lifetime, 40 years of working. So we grow up, we go to school, teachers tell us, parents tell us, you go to school, you be a good girl, you get good grades, and then you go to college, and then you get a career, and then you get a family, and then you do. So everybody sort of has a map to go do. Only at the end of that period of time, sometimes 20 years, sometimes 10, sometimes 40 years, sometimes 50 years, running on this treadmill of life, we realize that for all the time we are struggling to be successful, and many people have the money, they got the car, they got the house, they got the man, they got the woman, they got the kids, they got the dogs. And then they sit home in their very expensive piece of furniture and they say, I have no reason to be unhappy. I had great parents, I had a great life, I'm successful, my colleagues like me, and I've got more money than I'm ever going to spend in this lifetime. Why am I so unhappy? They only know that they're not happy, but they don't know why they're not happy. It's sort of like having an itch somewhere in your body and you don't know where to scratch it. So I think what is most annoying is that when we get to having spent our lifetime chasing after the wrong rainbow, only to find that at the end of that rainbow, there is no pot of gold. Or many of us don't even know there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We just chase after the rainbow because everybody was chasing after a rainbow and it was the thing to do. When we're young, we don't have any thoughts of our own. And we were given these ideas by people around us. If we're lucky, we get good parents, we get great teachers, we have great friends who give us good ideas, and we're being surrounded by an environment of good vibes. And we don't have much of a choice but to emerge with a bundle of good vibes. Then there are those of us who had grown up in a very nasty environment, no parents to take care of us, we have to struggle to eat every day, blah, blah, blah. And then they grow up, and you would think some of these people would turn out to be very nasty people. But research has shown that it's not just environment, it's not just genes. Some people say, if I had good genes, I'm successful because I had good genes, I had good nurturance. Some people say I'm not successful because I didn't have the good luck of having the good genes and the good nurturance, and so therefore I am a miserable mess. So research has shown that kids who grew up in bad environment can turn out to have a great, fulfilling life. And those who grew up in all kinds of great, what we deem to be great environments, turn out to have miserable lives. You cross off the environment, you cross off the genes, those alone don't work. So what does work? This one speaker I heard recently, she had a very successful career and she rose to be a medical director at Harvard at some project and very successful and had 3 beautiful children. And she found out that something's missing in her life. She's so busy doing so many things, helping so many people, but her personal life was empty and unfulfilling. And then she looked back at her mom and she says, but my mother, and I can identify with that because my mother was kind of like that, never been to school, never had the privilege of sitting in a classroom until she sat in my classroom, grew up with just bare necessities and no luxuries. She successfully raised 8 children. All of us who were her children had the opportunity to have a good life, and those of us who didn't did so because we made bad choices. But we all had the same opportunity to make good choices and have a good life. My mother died a fulfilled, happy woman because she married the person she loved, and they loved each other until my father died. Being widowed at 44, that she never needed to remarry, she said, one great love is enough to last me this whole lifetime. Don't need another. How many of us could say that of our intimate relationship? Isn't that a huge compliment? That they had shared a meaningful life together, and they had 8 children. And somehow she managed, at 44 being widowed, to be able to raise the rest of us and gave us a good education. Those of us who chose to go to college went to college. This woman, who was a scientist as well, went on to research what makes people happy. Obviously, money, prestige, career does not seem to be enough. Who are the happy people? Go back to a book I read many years ago, 2 brother sociologists who did a big study across the country to find out who are the millionaires out there who are really happy. Found out that the millionaires are not consisted of people who make huge sums of money. It's called the millionaire next door. You'll be most unsuspecting to know that some of the people who have millions of dollars stashed away are not the people who have flashy cars, flashy houses, and flashy jobs. It seems that the majority of these millionaires they study, the average household income was about $50,000. Together, they bring home only about $50,000. And yet, over a lifetime, some of these people have the proverbial mattress stuffed full of cash. Not the people who make a lot of money. And more importantly, these people are prudent. They are grateful for what they have. They're not driving the latest model every 2 years of the cars. They usually own a reliable car, most likely bought brand new, and they plan to drive it to the ground. And they would drive it for 10, 20 years because they take good care of the equipment. And they buy a well-built house, a modest one, and they take good care of the house. They choose suitable spouse, and they take good care of each other, and they hang on to each other for life. And yet, they don't do anything super spectacular. They are steady. If they make more money, they may enjoy a steak now and then, but it doesn't become a lifestyle. They're pretty regular, and yet when the weather changes, they know how to, and the big word I want to talk about is adapt. And this woman I heard talk about, she said, I've researched and read many papers, and it turns out the one thing, the only thing that is going to lead us to be happier human beings is our ability to adapt. Small word, ADAPT, adapt. So I look out in my garden this morning, and what inspired me In my back garden, there's a low-lying area that has a lot of water because it's part of a drainage system. And so when we came, and I said, well, the grass gets boggy and it's not very pretty. So I researched and found out the most adaptable tree to that environment was a willow tree. All these Chinese paintings, they have beautiful willow trees and it's beautiful. So I went to a nursery and they wanted an arm and a leg, like $750 to plant a willow tree for me. And I go, oh no, that's a lot of money. And besides, I like the challenge of nurturing a young tree than to buy a full-grown tree and stick it in my yard for all that money. So I researched and I finally settled on buying a little tree from Lowe's for $60. And I thought I did very well. We stuck it in the ground. Then a week later, of all places, I went to Aldi. And Aldi is a small supermarket in the United States, those of you who don't live here. I was quite surprised to find that they were selling trees at Aldi. Who would have thought that? And I saw a tiny little willow tree, much smaller than the one I bought at Lowe's. And get this, $15.99. And I thought I had struck gold, bought the tree. And Steve says, we already have one. I said, now we have two. So we stuck the two willow trees in the boggy part of the garden. The first tree is almost full grown, it's beautiful. So what is so special about the willow tree? It's flexible to people who have hard times. It brings me back to the simple gifts that we have to bend and bend and bend until we turn out right. We have to keep turning, to bow and to bend until we turn out right. The interesting thing is we have a lot of storms around here, and many big trees will get uprooted quite easily and quite frequently. The willow tree stands whatever the weather because it's flexible, because it bends, because it adapts. I'll take this back to martial arts. You don't have to be a big, burly person to win a physical fight. You only need to know how to adapt. When I was a teenager, I studied judo. And being the overachieving Chinese student, I wanted to attain the highest level belt available to us at that time, which was a brown belt. You get step by step higher in judo by winning competitions or passing grading tests. So there are many steps from where I was a white belt to get to a brown level. And being the overachieving Chinese person, I did not want to go through all the steps. So there was this competition. There was only one brown belt holder in the competition. So if I beat him, I get the brown belt. Just imagine I was 20 pounds lighter than I am today. This skinny little 5'2" kid, and my opponent was 6'1", more than 200 pounds, big burly boy with a brown belt, which means that he has some skills. But I decided that I will not go home that day until I got the brown belt. And I know that if I go with him mass against mass, I wouldn't stand a chance. So I have to be smart about this. I have to figure out how I can win this competition without being 220 pounds. He was more than twice my weight at the time. I realized that I have to practice all the things I learned in judo, which is to use the minimum effort for the maximum efficiency. How do I adapt? We know in martial arts, we don't have to go head on with someone. In fact, the last thing you want to do when somebody's coming directly at you is to not stand there and take the blow. That's called stupid, right? You're bound to get knocked over unless you were bigger. And even if you were bigger than your opponent, it's just silly to use your mass that way. So all you have to do is step aside and let the person's mass and inertia trip him to fall. So the competition began. Now watch. There's this little girl in one corner, big boy in the other corner. We get up to the middle of the mat. We take a bow. Ding, ding, the bell goes. It was very easy. This big guy just lifted me up like a toothpick and threw me over his shoulders. Wham, bang, I'm on the floor. It didn't stand 1 minute, of contact. I was on the floor. And I thought, I am not going home today without a brown belt. I'm still hanging on to his jacket. And he's still coming towards me. And now I'm on the mat. And all I had to do was lay down, relax on the mat, put one leg against his belly, and like a feather, I flipped him over. And now he's on the other side of the floor, flat on the ground. And the competition is I must be able to pin him for so many seconds before I would win. So I jumped up and quickly pinned him. And with all my might, all I could think about is I am not going home today without a brown belt. That was how I got my brown belt. But I also learned from my judo instructor. I still remember his name. His name was Yoichi Murayama from Japan. And he says, you must learn the first thing in martial arts is not to engage. When you see a fight coming, the first thing you do is run. How does that work for our survival? When we don't know what to do, we adapt. We adapt. My mother adapted to not being able to read the most part of her life. It didn't mean that she was doomed to be stupid because she was illiterate. She didn't spend half her life blaming her parents for not sending her to school. She took what she's got at the time and made the best of it. She did hire a tutor to come to teach her how to read and write after my father died. She was 44 at that time. Can you imagine any of us learning how to read at the age of 44? And she was so proud that she could read and she practiced. She read the newspaper every day. She also wanted to sing opera. She loved Chinese opera. And she was always singing as she was cooking or taking care of us. And she decided at that time, if I could learn how to read and write, I could learn how to sing. And she had a love for music and she wanted to learn how to play a Chinese instrument. And so she joined an equivalent of a YW club, and she learned and she hired teachers to teach her. And when they come to teach her at the house, it was like somebody trying to slaughter a cat. And I would run upstairs and put the pillows over it was awful. It was horrible. But my mother persisted. She imagined herself singing opera, Chinese opera. And it took God knows how many years, every day killing the cat, I call it. And eventually she and her club performed at charity shows, and she eventually was singing on the radio with her group. And so my mom taught me as a kid, you don't have to take no for an answer. If you want something, you have to adapt and you have to figure it out. And you have to go after the things you want in creative ways. Just because everybody tells you, no, you can't do this, doesn't mean you can't do this. Now, I have also learned to adapt negatively. My uncles told me I would never learn how to play the piano. And he said, are you kidding me? You only have 10 fingers. There are 88 keys. How in the world are you going to play the piano? Now, it never occurred to me that there are many people out there with only 10 fingers. And the piano has always had 88 keys. People play it all the time. Just because my uncle didn't play it all the time. He never could play the piano. So we learn about this ability to adapt. Can make us, can break us. But nevertheless, if we don't adapt, we'll never move anywhere. That's why people say so-and-so is like a stick in the mud. What does that mean? It means you're a stick stuck in the mud and you would not budge. And you know what happens to people who don't adapt? They get run over. If you're standing in the middle of the road and you're saying, I am here. Let's look at the little stuff at home. This COVID-19 thing. People are stuck in a situation that we cannot control. Never in our wildest dreams have we imagined in this lifetime we'll have a situation like this. There are people out there who refuse to adapt, who refuse to accept that there is a COVID virus out there. And you know what? It can kill you. You know what? We're not asking big deals from you. Just cover your face when you go out. Oh no, I'm not going to adapt. If you look at biology, every species of life evolves because they need to adapt to new situations. And if we don't adapt, we'll all be dead. If you look at the COVID virus, it is constantly adapting for survival. Back in the day when I taught the class on HIV and AIDS, to put an end to the life of the virus is to first kill the host. No host, no life, no mutation, no adaptation, dead, end of story. Same here. If we want to be stick in the mud and not move, the consequence is quite obvious and it's not going to be a good one. How do we adapt? If you look at your life, I'm sure you'll find many instances where your adaptation has helped you in one direction or another. If your adaptation to current situations has caused you negative outcomes, and you say, oh, never mind, and you keep going and don't change, you will end up with an outcome you don't desire. Or if you're doing very well and you know nothing lasts forever, and you don't open your heart to new opportunities and change and adapt, then we will all be extinct. Survival of the species is very basic. If you are stranded in a shipwreck on an island somewhere, you're not going to get fried rice for dinner. You're not going to get chow mein or chao kway teow for dinner. Can you survive? Can you adapt? Or are you going to say, no, I don't eat meat. No, I don't eat that. Have you met people who come to your house as a guest and how rude they are? Oh, I don't eat this. Oh, I don't eat that. You adapt. Is it more important to suit you, or is it more important to honor your host who's gone through 10 hours of preparing this meal for you? No, but I can't do this. I cannot take a bite of this because I simply won't eat it. So a lot of times we are so stuck in our ways with total disregard for the people around us as to ask the question, how is my inflexibility going to affect the people around me? Is it worth the price? Do I want to pay the price? At first, I thought I was being dishonest. Go back to 1979, when I first came to America as an immigrant wife. I spent the first 18 months of my life in the United States being a guest in my mother-in-law's house. So Mrs. Neal hadn't seen her son for a very long time. this is how she gives love. Granted, she wasn't an excellent cook, but she cooks with a lot of love and a lot of care. And every night would be this incredible family recipe dessert that she's making for her son, hoping that this foreign daughter-in-law would learn to love her son as she loves her son by making all these desserts. And I did not grow up with a big dessert after a big meal. And so invariably, I would have a big plate. The meal portion size is a pie cut in 6 pieces. Not 8, but cut in 6 pieces. And the son probably gets 2 of those 6 pieces. And the rest of us each got a piece, which was way too big than I would eat after I've enjoyed a meal. I would take a bite and slowly try to enjoy it. And the mother-in-law would say, Kuitai, don't you have this stuff in Malaysia? Don't you like sweet things? Don't you like apples in the pie? Don't you like ice cream on apple pie? Do you have ice cream out there? Do you have cows? I would have to go through this whole litany of interrogation every day when I couldn't finish my dessert. So what do? Do I tell her the truth and say, I did say I love this, but I can't eat so much? It's not acceptable that I can't eat the dessert. And so I have to adapt. How do I not hurt this lovely lady's feelings who had gone through so much trouble to make the dessert? I also don't want to hurt myself by gorging myself every night. How do I do that? I have to adapt. So I have learned, and thank goodness she has every night a beautiful table with tablecloths. I would eat very slowly. The husband would have gobbled his up very quickly and will swap plates under the table. So he gets to eat 3 pieces and I get to eat 2 bites. And he's happy, I'm happy, and we're all happy. And I can sit there and give her praises for her efforts and her food. Am I a bad person? Am I lying? It's a very kind way of adapting to the situation. I can't be American if I don't eat dessert. Never mind, nobody in that household has ever asked if I miss my food from home and if we can go find a Chinese restaurant for me to have a bowl of rice. Adaptation has to come from us. We have to make that choice to adapt. We have to make that choice to live with the changes. But adapt we must if we want to survive. And I think today I can say I'm more a banana, yellow outside and white inside, because I've lived in the white culture longer than I have lived in the Chinese culture. But give me 2 hours in Kuala Lumpur, I would talk Malaysian English immediately, and I would eat Malaysian food faster than you can say boo. And yet when I come home, I'm happy to have a hamburger on the grill. In that, I have straddled 2 cultures most of my adult life. I have learned to adapt without making a nuisance of myself. So this small change of being able to adapt would lead to many big outcomes.
A year and a half ago, I decided, after reading numerous nutrition books, that the standard American diet was pretty sad, because most of us, 50% of the adult population will get a chronic disease because they've eaten too many calories, too many good desserts, and too much meat. And so I have adapted. I'm now eating a plant-based diet. I'm not a vegan, eat mostly vegetables and fruits, nuts and seeds, whole grains. It was adaptation. And then because I'm the cook, I had to bring my husband along. And that took a little adaptation on his part. But now he's saying, Diane, I like the food you make now. much better than what we had when we were younger. So, yes, everyone can change. Most people are like the people that won't wear the mask to avoid COVID-19. It's like, whoo, no, can't, no, I have to have my meat. I hate vegetables. I'm afraid that they probably will go on to get a chronic disease.
And sometimes people say, oh, we don't want to buy organic. It's so expensive and blah, blah, blah. And I say, pay now or pay later. It's a lot more enjoyable to pay now than to pay to be in the ICU.
I was just thinking about how sometimes we also have to make adaptations to our adaptations. Because when we're little, something maybe we've decided, if I'm just quiet, you know, I won't draw ire or whatever. And then that doesn't serve us later in life because we're too quiet when we need to speak.
And I think adaptation is dynamic, it's continuous. It's not, I'm going to change to this and then I'm okay. It's sort of like, oh, I graduated, I have a terminal degree, I don't ever have to touch a book again. That would make it terminal. So it's a constant process that we have to keep changing.
I couldn't help but notice how it's easier based on your attachment to whatever it is you need to adapt to. I'll give an example. Maybe it's easy for me to adapt to a new culture, but it's very hard for me to adapt to, well, actually, I'll give an example of something that I'm having a difficult time adapting to right now, which was switching my business to an online business. You know, letting go of the attachment of having an office and feeling like my rug was pulled from under my feet when this whole thing of COVID started. And it has taken me some time to release. No, there's a better word. I can't even think of it.
Detach.
And then, yeah, let go of the attachment to the old and welcome and adapt to the new. But it's easier to adapt to certain things so you're not so attached to based on your belief system.
The monkey with one hand in the tree
Yes.
with the peanuts and trying to reach the banquet on the other side.
Right.
You have to adapt to let go of what you already have in your hand before you can release yourself to go enjoy the banquet that's waiting for you. Adaptation means willingness to let go of something to get to something else that works better. What works better for you now did not work better for you before. It's interesting. Steve and I talk about it often and we laugh about it. We met each other later in life. When we got married, I was 48 years old and Steve was 44. And he often said, if I met you 20 years ago, I'll be scared of you. I wouldn't dare come out to talk to you. And I was wondering, my God, I know people already tell me I'm scary right now. Was I even scary then that you wouldn't want to talk to me? I also realized that as I listened to what Steve was like in his 20s, I said, I wouldn't come 10 feet near you. Not because I feel that I'm better or worse, but because it seems like we are so far apart, we have nothing in common. It wasn't until later in life that we both changed, each in our individual ways, that we have found common ground at the time when we were in our 40s, because we both had to go those 20 years to acquire the changes and adapt to become the people we were when we met, and everything seems to click perfectly. And then you think, well, you know, I love you so much right now. When I marry you, I can't imagine how I could possibly love you even more. We've been married 20 years. And I think we each love each other more than we can say. And today, the way we love each other is very different from the way we loved each other when we first met. Because we're both very different people 20 years later. But certain core values don't change. The person that you really are deep inside does not change. How we manifest it and adapt to environment, that is the behavior that ensures our survival.
I've had to adapt quite a lot as well, as I'm sure everyone has during COVID. So I lost a significant proportion of my income. immediately when all the lockdown happened. So I was pretty scared for 2 weeks or so, and then scrambled together, put in 5 job applications, and got a job working in telehealth through a company on the other side of the country. And it was the best thing that happened for 3-4 months. Our Australian government has pulled all the funding for all of that and more. So my physical job has also suffered all of a sudden as well in the last week. And I've lost about 15% of my income that I've had from my physical job from the last 17 years. That's just changed in the last week. And instead of feeling very sad and angry and scared about it, I actually just sent a letter to my boss tonight about an hour ago, thanking him for just a letter of appreciation for everything that, you know, that I've had this wonderful job for so long and that this company has supported me.
And you feel good about it. You look like you genuinely feel grateful for the time you've had on the job. And so when you let go of that, I am certain you create space for something new and wonderful for you to adapt towards. It's nature at work. If you're willing to adapt, the environment will adapt with you. I also want to share, we don't have to blindly adapt. There is the notion of adapting to change when change smacks you in the face. T0 adaptation. COVID landed, it has landed, it is here, and this is what we know, and this is what we have to do right now. When we went in lockdown happened, nobody prepared, and everybody ran out of toilet paper. So our quickest adaptation to that was, no problem. I said, Steve, go to Lowe's and buy 2 bidet kits and install bidets in our toilets. So we have no paper to wipe, we wash. People in Muslim countries do that all the time. I learned about this bidet whole simple thing. I don't have to install this very complicated and elegant and very expensive French bidet in my house. All I need is a garden hose type deal with a squirt thing, and you wash your bottom, and it's actually more hygienic. It's clean. And in the heat of summer, you don't even need to dry. Why it dries itself is like air conditioning in your butt. Adaptation on the spot. Biologically, we are genetically engineered to adapt on the spot. You look at a paramecium, a single cell organism, and it moves its protoplasm. If it encounters an obstacle, what does it do? It wraps itself around it and it ingests it. If you're in my way, I'll just eat you up. Get out of my way, the paramecium says. But there are other ways of adapting. We don't have to be so drastic all the time. If I walk the street and you are a bully and you say you can't go through, I said, all right, I'll turn around and take another way. There are many ways to get to the market. Or I can be nasty and fight you. Many ways to make adaptations, and sometimes we don't have a chance to think about it. If this doesn't work, I'm going to find another way. If I lost my job and I haven't got any money coming in, what are 5 ways I can make enough money to put food on the table? Maybe all I need is food on the table. Maybe I can go down the street and barter my services for a sack of rice. There are many ways to get there. The important thing is to know where you want to go. So that is the instant adaptation. However, we also have the luxury of planning. Research has shown that if you think in a positive way, you will speak in a positive way, you will act in a positive way, and things will flow for you in a positive way. And we can have the negative, the same thing. So instead of sitting around and perseverating on yada, 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 I have a bad day, the bad day turns into the worst day, the worst day turns into the most awful day, and let me tell 10 of my friends about it. You're just spraying your dirty water everywhere. So if you had a bad day and a lousy day and you go, you know what, enough already, take a deep breath Imagine you put it in a packet and flush it down the loo. Now I have a blank slate. How would you like to approach what's in front of you? Do you want to approach it through a veil of negativity, or do you want to say, there's only one thing I want today, and it's got to be better than yesterday? You don't have to ask for a big thing. What is one small thing I want today that's going to make this better than yesterday? It seems like a very small question, and yet it seems like a big task to respond to, isn't it? So I think if I can leave you with this idea, what is one small thing you can do today that makes it better than yesterday? Consider it and do it. And there's one small thing you can do for me today. Go out and make somebody smile.